Welcome everyone to today's webinar on how your company can inspire employees with a purpose mindset. We are so happy to have you and really look forward to having a robust discussion. A few housekeeping items before we begin. All of your lines will be on mute, so we encourage you to use the question to submit questions in either the Q&A box or through chat, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the session. During today's session, we hope to accomplish a few things. Given this past year, I think I can speak for all of us that we have experienced many new challenges. So this is really an opportunity for us to take a pause and to reflect on our own individual purposes and the role we play within our companies and organizations, and the impact we have on those workplaces and communities. We want to get real on the challenges and talk about how to take achievable steps towards progress. And lastly, we want to talk about how you can lead with a purpose mindset to advocate for investments and advancements within your program. Thank you, and it's my pleasure to turn things over to Scott Jackson, President and CEO of Global Impact.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's exciting for us to be here to talk a little bit about the purpose mindset and how to connect each of your stories to your companies and to the change in the world that you want to make. And we couldn't have two better presenters and individuals who really represent that purpose mindset and bringing it every day to their work around the world. It's my great pleasure to introduce Akhtar Badshaw. And Akhtar is the author of Purpose Mindset, and we're going to hear a lot more about purpose mindset. He's also the former head of corporate social responsibility at Microsoft. And following his time at Microsoft, he didn't want to be idle. So he teaches, he's an associate professor at the University of Washington. He also has a consulting firm that works in social impact and really is just such an amazing thought leader in this area. I've been following Akhtar behind him for now over 20 years. And it is such a privilege to know him and to know that the change in the world that he's made. And likewise, Veena Jayadaya is an exceptional professional. And Veena started her career in microfinance and international development. And she's now the head of corporate social responsibility at the Guardian Company. And she oversees a number of different areas there, including community investments, employee engagement, and inclusion and diversity. And Akhtar has been a longtime partner to Global Impact, and Veena has been an outstanding board member to Global Impact. So we're so privileged to have them involved with our work and also here today to share with you. So just a little bit about Global Impact. Global Impact is an international nonprofit, and we work with the public, private, and nonprofit sectors and partners, all about really inspiring greater giving, giving not only more giving, but more impactful giving for the world's most vulnerable. And we do that by providing a set of advisory services, back office support, and fiscal sponsorship, and try to meet particularly our corporate partners kind of where they're at in their journey. A few questions we hear all the time from companies large and small is, what do my stakeholders care about and how do I figure that out? How do I bring my commitment to this work to the company internally and be able to share my own purpose with internal officials and leaders and employees, but also how do I bring it to the outside work of the corporation? And in what ways do I continue to kind of demonstrate the shared values that I hold closely? And finally, how do I measure impact? How do I measure impact in our communities? How do I measure impact in our various programs for the company? And we'll come back to some of those, but keep some of these in mind. My hope is that they're relevant to you as well, and hope that you can kind of think about how you translate this notion of purpose mindset to some of these questions and challenges. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Akhtar and Veena for a conversation. We'll also take questions. Brittany, that the best way is to send them to you in the chat. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Great. And so with that, Veena and Akhtar, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott and Akhtar. It's really an honor to share this virtual stage with you today. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Just to give our audience participants a little bit of context in terms of my perspective on corporate purpose. So I am the head of corporate social responsibility at Guardian Life. We're a life insurance, mutual life insurance company based in New York City, but we have a presence across the United States, in Canada and India. And one of the things that I think about when it comes to a purpose mindset is that it relates to, one, corporate purpose and how companies articulate that and infuse it into the fabric of the culture of their company. I think about it in terms of the remit of philanthropy professionals, of corporate social responsibility professionals, because it is our job to really activate this sense of personal responsibility or unlock individual social responsibility in our workforce and in our networks more broadly. And so that purpose mindset then gets infused to every layer, every level of our organization and every role, so that everyone who is part of the ecosystem has a shared sense of, I can do more, right? I can do more, whether it's in my job, my day job. I can do more in terms of the daily decisions that I make, whether it's at work or outside of work. But it's having that shared purpose that I think makes the work that we do in corporate social responsibility so vital, especially in a time like now. So with that, I wanted to open up to Akhtar to talk a little bit more about his perspective on corporate purpose and some of the early ways that this was able to be infused at Microsoft.
First of all, Veena, thank you very much for being part of this, and I'm so thrilled to be here. And Scott, our partnership and friendship goes a very long way, and you've written a phenomenal book and lead an amazing organization that has brought in hundreds of thousands of people to and empowered them through generosity and their commitment to giving back into the community. So I couldn't be speaking to a much better audience and leaders in this space. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity. So when I, looked at writing this book, it kind of came to me from two different angles. One, my wife joined Microsoft in 1993 in New York. And every October, I would hear on the East Coast this rumbling of madness that happened on the Redmond campus, where employees got together to generate resources for their community. And I, practicing architect, educator in the nonprofit sector, could not understand why this madness, what was going on. We land up in Seattle in 1998, and I start seeing firsthand this effort of employees mobilizing to invest back into the community, and in many cases into efforts that they had no relationship to, but were just being asked, whether it was for disasters or it was for other causes. So to me, that was just observing around how a company creates a space in which individuals are able to activate their purpose and their compassion and empathy. When I joined Microsoft to lead this, I then started seeing what it really went into making this happen. It's a moment that started in 1983, where Mary Gates, Bill's mother, gets his son to create and start just a payroll deduction program in support of United Way. It's a very simple effort, which could have died on the vines because Bill was not focused on that. He was focused on the company and generating resources for the company. And in 1985, Bill Newcomb comes in as the chief legal officer. And he recognizes that here is this young company with all of these people spending nights and days on campus trying to change the world through technology. But he recognized that they will grow up in this community, they will establish roots in this community, they will get married in this community, they will have kids in this community. And unless we provide them the opportunity to experience the community as a fully fledged citizen and not as an outsider, there is going to be a disconnect. And he asked Bill to create the employee matching gifts program. And Bill quickly understood the importance of this and agreed for it to be an open program to any nonprofit of their choice. What it became is, rather than it being a moment, it now got the first sparks to turn it into a movement, and to a movement which then became part of the company's DNA. That it was not about the giving aspect, it was about creating a culture that shifted the technologists, who are basically all engineers, A-plus personalities, hyper competitive, into getting the sense of empathy and infusion into the community. And I think those two coming together is what brought about the larger purpose of the company. Of course, the company's purpose was, at that time, a computer on every desk and every home. But it was about changing people's lives through technology. But for an average person, Redmond was far away and nobody could get there. But because of service, employees actually brought the company into the community. And as Bill Gates Sr. wrote in his book, Showing Up for Life, they actually showed up for life and not just for work. And I think that's the marriage between the purpose of a company and individual purpose that reflects the values of the community. And bringing the two together then activates the larger purpose, right? So Carol Cohn's research, where she did and interviewed, companies, 84% of the companies have a purpose statement, but only 24% of employees actually recognize that the company has a purpose statement and is doing anything about it. So the point I'm trying to make is, a company can have a purpose. We, as leaders of the company's philanthropy, can have a purpose. But unless you actually activate the employees who are the company, not the product, not the building, if we don't bring them along, then it just is something on the aside, which is good, but not fully integrated. And I think that's what Microsoft was able to do, not necessarily that they actually planned it that way, but it happened that way because of two things. One, it was a hyper-competitive environment. So these guys all wanted to compete with each other as to who would invest the most in the community. But somewhere along the line, they actually started getting a few gray hairs and started recognizing that this was not something that they had to do. They were not being asked to do this. they were actually being invited to do this, and it was a privilege for them to serve the community. And that transformation from being asked to do it versus being given the opportunity to do it, where it was an honor and a privilege, that is something that the company has very consciously tried to keep. And that invites the community in.
Akhtar, I completely agree. And something, one of the many things that has struck me is that it's not just about, so for example, the matching gifts program is wonderful, and the fact that it was open to all nonprofit organizations versus being, you know, a very restricted type of program meant you could probably it would probably resonate with many employees who have different interests. But purpose goes beyond, philanthropy goes beyond just the money piece of it, right? And so when you are thinking about philanthropy or CSR, it's not about one singular answer or one way to provide opportunities for our colleagues to get engaged in the community. It is unlocking all the different ways in which employees at a company can get involved, learn more, and it's about the contribution of more than just money. It is the time, the passion, the skills, the creativity, all of that comes to bear. And sometimes a program like a matching gifts program can be the start of that journey in unlocking the possibilities.
I completely agree, right? So you know, in Microsoft case, they used the employee giving program and the matching gifts program as a way to do it, right? For a very long time, it was all about, hey, write a check and be happy, and let's have fun doing it. But eventually people figured out that that was just the bare minimum you could do. So when we came in, and Pamela Passman, my boss, and we quickly realized that this was really not a philanthropic program. It really had to be an HR benefit. And we moved the program in terms of its financial resources from philanthropy to HR. And Steve Ballmer right away agreed, because what it did is that now it unlocked a huge amount of resources, that it was not a direct budget that we had every year. And now you could actually start getting focused on not just the resources, but the time and talent aspect of what an employee has. What does a company have, right? It has four things. One, it has its acumen, which is its product, or so there is its acumen. It has its people, and the people have time, talent, and treasure. It has financial resources, whatever scale it may be. And then it has the ability to advocate. Some may call it PR, but I actually call it advocate, right? Guardian for Good is all about advocating from a healthy lifestyle and healthy living. That's it. That you can advocate because you can bring the power of the company and everybody else around that issue. So if you can combine those four elements, now you actually create a culture which shifts. It's not just about making profits, but it is about the cliche now that we have, that it is purpose, people, and profits, or profits, per people, purpose, however you want to do it. But I think the piece that I was most interested in investigating is, at Microsoft, we had this enormous focus on the growth mindset. And it is the right focus, right? I mean, I think fixed mindset people are the most happiest, because They are contented. Hey, I know what I'm doing. I don't have to do anything more. I go to work, I come back, I go have my beer, I go play bowling, I go fishing. That's it. Growth mindset, you're constantly seeking to improve yourself. But it's a very personal piece. It's self-improvement which leads to company improvement. Purpose adds that added element of community into the virtuous cycle. I improve, the company improves, the community improves, I improve, and it keeps going. So what I found was that this effort, the space that Microsoft created for employees to come in and engage, shifted their mindset from a growth mindset to a purpose mindset. And the combining of the two is where you actually start seeing phenomenal results that so many Microsoft employees have then gone out and done good in small ways and in large ways. And I think that's the role of a company. And that, to me, we started off with Brittany talking about we're living in these extraordinary times where there is this complete, we were living in these two different worlds. There is a world that is thriving and there is a world that is not thriving. We always spend time at work, but we at least had the luxury of going home. Now our work has actually invaded into our space. It has taken over our living room. It has taken over our dining table. It has taken over, and now we actually have to shush up our little kid because we are on Zoom, or my wife cannot open the refrigerator because I'm on a call. So that is a mental shift that is hard for all of us to grapple with. And it is really in this time where you need the workplace, not just businesses, but the workplace, whether it's the government sector, the education sector, the nonprofit sector, the workplace, to be able to give people the opportunity to ignite their purpose, and in doing so, heal themselves, right? Move from the me mindset into the we mindset. And in doing so, you're also healing yourself. And that, to me, is the critical role that companies play. It is this, and I'll just give one additional point of view here. We have, you go back to Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, and you kind of look at it and start talking about creating bonding networks, right? That we've created ourselves into bonding networks, and social media as hyper-partisanized the bonding environments. We now don't even kind of go anywhere else. But what is critical is bridging networks, where you're able to bridge across people and across aisles and across religion and across diversity and across communities and across gender and across race. And the workplace is the only environment that actually allows you to do that. And if you do it through the lens of purpose and not through work, then you break down hierarchies. Then a senior VP of a company is working alongside the newest member of the company because there is a purpose of doing something good. And in allowing you to do that, you're actually building the muscle of bridging, which is what we are going to need if we're going to survive this world. Right? I mean, COVID has created this enormous impact, psychological and physical, on us. And so it behooves companies and organizations to invest in these opportunities to give everyone the chance to bridge in the way that activates their purpose and not just the company's purpose.
I loved this building the muscle of bridging. That really resonated with me, and I'm sure with many, many members of the audience. I think those of us who sit in corporate social responsibility feel that we are that connective tissue to build that bridge. So when you talk about the, matching gifts programs, volunteer grants programs that at Microsoft, matching gifts programs moving to HR because it's a benefit and it should be resourced as such. But then you have the other pieces of working with HR colleagues and colleagues in the business about engaging colleagues, about inclusion and diversity, environmental sustainability, and corporate social responsibility sits at the nexus of all of that. So many of the collaborations, the partnerships, the buy-in that we're getting at all levels across the organization is to help build that bridge and build the muscle such that it becomes the norm. So it's not just those few who are sitting in these positions that are making the connections, but that it is something that happens more organically over time because it becomes part of the culture of an organization.
And I think that it requires a certain amount of leadership. Right? I mean, in Microsoft case, it was, and I don't know, Scott, whether you attended the Greater Giving Summit yesterday, where Bill and Melinda both talked about their own upbringing and their family values, right? They basically both talked about how Bill was basically talking about his mother and father getting him out into the streets, standing in the corner holding placards. And Melinda talking about how her mother, through her church, was stuffing envelopes. And so they both came from that environment. So the company had some aspects of the DNA already built into it. But the parents played an enormous role in motivating the young employees that were there by taking them under the wing and nurturing them and giving them that sustenance, which Bill was not giving. Bill was basically giving them the sustenance around this engineering and business. And so this environment happened, right? And we are now the guardians of that, those that actually work in that space. And it's every company has people that are driven by purpose. Every company has that. I mean, you can actually divide a company up into three. There's a third of the people are driven by purpose, third are driven by wealth, third are driven by status. But for the other two, it's not a value judgment because that's where you are in your particular time in life. You can activate purpose as the secondary driver. And if you do that, now you're transforming the culture of the company. There's nothing wrong with people making money. There's nothing wrong with people growing in their jobs. But there is value to do it in a way that it is not just benefiting you, but it is extending out into the larger community. And it's just a matter of a lens that you put on and the viewpoint you create. And that comes because leadership is affording you the space to do that. And that's challenging at times. As I was saying, I was on a call with the leadership at Expedia this morning talking about purpose mindset, and their tagline is travel is a force for good, which I think is just a fantastic tagline. But they keep it quiet because they basically see this as being humble. And I say it's actually not. Nobody knows this is your tagline. I had no idea why I should choose Expedia versus Airbnb for my travel. But if you actually show up in the community with your employees that actually says travel is a force for good, that's such a motivating factor. Right? Why am I going to Expedia to make a booking? Because it will also help this small community that I'm going to go in, because I can stay in a small hotel or I can eat at a bodega, and I'm going back and reviving the community. And I am actually doing cultural exchange rather than just travel. So there is this, all of these elements, right? I mean, Guardian with its mutual life and insurance has its own purpose. But how do you get the employees to carry it within them so that they show up in the community not wearing a Guardian shirt or a Guardian t-shirt, but actually embodying, carrying the values of the company? And that, I think, is what needs to happen more. I think we kind of all put on our little logos and feel that, you know, if I wear that, I'm now showing good. Which is, I mean, hey, trust me, I've got lots of free Microsoft t-shirts. These are my standard, you know, wardrobe. But still, it's going beyond that.
Agreed. It goes beyond the company's swag and the volunteer t-shirts to show your company's logo out in the community. It is, like you were saying, you have colleagues who are driven by purpose, you have colleagues who are driven by status, colleagues who are driven by wealth, but it doesn't mean that there isn't an intersection between those groups. And I think the work that we do is trying to find ways to engage with colleagues whose primary drivers in the workforce. I think it's trying to find opportunities to infuse opportunities for these various groups of employees. So I'll give an example. For those who are more driven by status, there are ways in a corporate social responsibility philanthropy program where you can think about diverse talent pipeline and the community partnerships that you have, and how they can bring on talent. But how can they bring on talent? By building a real relationship with these community partners, understanding the value that the community partners and their participants bring to the table, and there's business value in it, right? So the talent pipeline piece, I feel, is something that many companies are just starting to explore, but there's real possibility in there. So it's not just the executive who's saying, we have these targets that we have to meet. It is those who are making hiring decisions lower in the organization saying, I see value in this. So even if I am driven by my status at the company, here's one way that I can help push the needle forward. Or how do you use philanthropic corporate social responsibility efforts to raise your own internal profile in your company, let alone externally and in the community? So if you are getting engaged in an employee resource group, in a CSR related employee group, you're leading one of our community partnerships, that is a way for you to gain leadership skills, build your network within the company, raise your internal profile. And there may be opportunities that then spill obviously into your external visibility too. But I really believe that there are opportunities for everyone to get engaged. It's having the mindset that we are open to exploring what those opportunities might be. So it doesn't have to only be those who are primarily driven by purpose who can get engaged in this.
Right. And I think that you're absolutely correct. And I think it's, you know, so in my book, I kind of highlight these 5 principles around purpose. And this basically applies to everybody, right? I mean, how are you thinking about yourself in the world? Are you working from strengths, or are you trying to fix a problem? If you put on the lens of the strengths, then you are actually you are bringing strengths of everybody and trying to envision a future. And I give an example of this colleague at Microsoft, Roberto Angelo, and you know, they had a son after multiple miscarriages, and the son was born with a stroke and partially paralyzed on one side. They were devastated, this young couple. And for 2 years, they tried everything to work on the side of his body that was weak. So they were constantly looking at ways of exercising, doing this, therapy, till they met a neurosurgeon who basically talked about the mirror concept and said, stop focusing on the side that is weak, focus on the side that is strong, and the body will imitate. And they started doing that. And the first thing that the kid saw was joy in the eyes of the parents. The kid was no longer a problem to fix. It was a person to embrace with its own value. So that, I think, is a very important piece. The second is, and especially those of us that are in the nonprofit community are already always looking at scarcity of resources. I want people to put on the lens of abundance. And I share stories of how different people put on that lens of abundance, and out of that created major efforts that have actually changed the world. Third, don't focus on how well you're doing things, right? It is not about focusing on doing things right. It is about picking the right thing to do. It is not about efficiency. It is about effectiveness. We can either create organizations or we can create movements. I suggest we start creating movements and not organizations. Microsoft created a movement around technology. The company is just a shell. It's just a way to feed the movement. But all of us can create a movement because the movement is no longer top down. It is bottoms up. And I talk about Kevin Wang in my book, who after so many years of beating his head with me on starting this program of teaching computer science in inner city schools, was finally able to get a program where they are in 600 schools with 6,000 volunteers from across the country, Amazon, all the tech companies, who are going in and teaching kids on computer science and advanced computer science and spending a whole year teaching. That's a massive amount of time and talent that is being committed. And this is just one individual who refused to give up and created a movement instead of an organization. And then how do we move from the spectrum of generosity to empathy and compassion? And it is on that spectrum that we start moving from the focus on the me and the focus on the we. And that's where you start discovering purpose as that renewable source of energy. And as our, poet laureate Amanda Gorman said, at inauguration, for there is always light if you're only brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Purpose, to me, is that switch that allows us to see that we are the light and we can turn ourselves on anytime we want. And if we all do that, and what are companies doing to provide you with that opportunity to discover that inner switch, that we can turn it on. And that turning on that light is what then feeds back into the purpose of the company and feeds back into the value of society, and you then become that beacon. And I think that's what we want to aspire. And I think if we can do that, then I think we make change, and positive change.
I don't really know how I follow after that. That was really inspiring. In terms of unlocking this, though, so there are companies that have not yet started on this journey. So they don't necessarily have an articulation of what the company's purpose is. And so what are the first steps that an organization can take in terms of uncovering this and also putting together some of the more fundamental pieces around employee engagement that help then demonstrate this purpose inside the company and out in the community?
So I'll give you one example, which I write about in my book. It's a startup. Well, now it's a unicorn, but it's still using, investor money. It's not a profitable company. It's a friend of mine, ex-Microsoft, and it's a tech company. We all got locked up. Everybody went home to work from. But they used to feed their employees every day. A smaller company located in a place where, going out to eat was not easy. So they just said, we'll just feed everybody. And one of the employees' spouse was a school teacher. And she basically told her husband, hey, look, kids are shut out and we're not feeding these kids. And you guys are saving money by not feeding yourself. Can you donate that money to feed the kids? The employee basically called up the CEO and said, hey, what do you think? And he said, yeah, let's do it. It didn't have any material impact on them at that point. But what it did was it shifted the employees' focus from them to recognizing the community. At the same time, you started seeing all of the Black Lives Matter issues start coming up. Employees then had the courage to say, hey, we are this white-brown company. We're all tech guys. Where is our diversity? What are we doing about diversity? How are we thinking about diversity? So they started working on that. Then comes the politics, and people are actually saying, hey, we want to be engaged in getting the vote out. And out of that came a program that basically said, we're going to give every employee a week off. If they want to get educated on diversity, they can go do that. They want to go volunteer, they can do that. They want to go be engaged in politics, they can do that. So it's these small steps, but it happens because somebody asks somebody. Mary Gates asked Bill. Employee asked Samir. Somebody else asked somebody. So Kevin Wang asked me to create the Steels program. It took me 3 years to recognize until Satya Nadella picked up the phone and called me and said, what the heck are you doing, man? He's got to be you with you. Why is he wasting his time working as a software engineer? This is the impact this is going to have on the company. So not all of us are brilliant at every time recognizing what is in front of us. So we need an external force that can actually open our eyes or put on a different lens. And it comes from anybody. And that's the place I want people to feel comfortable in doing. I know we have several questions here.
So Akhtar, I see a question on talking about the interconnectedness of programs. So what about the interplay between matching programs such as employee programs such as matching giving, volunteerism, corporate giving, grant making? How is this done at Microsoft? I'm happy to talk about it at Guardian, but please go ahead.
So, I think, now Microsoft is a kind of not a great, it's an example that's hard for people to emulate, right? Because such a huge company, it's such a profitable company. But where did it start off with? It started off with very early on, Bill actually agreeing to $10,000 as a match. which was, and he was smart. He knew nobody was going to take that. But if we put it out there, it will actually excite people. Today, the match is 15,000. The company does, I mean, every employee doesn't max out. It's a small percentage of the company that maxes out. I mean, if everybody maxed out, it would be a $2 billion impact on the company. But it was the vision to understand that by putting something big out there will motivate people. And even, yesterday Bill was still complaining as to why people don't actively participate, right? I mean, he brought up the Microsoft example and he said, more people should be giving. Why are you not taking all that match? Why are you leaving money on the table? But the point is, so from there, you kind of then say, there was a time when the company was growing rapidly, people were getting wealthy, money was the focus. Then you get into that space where the company is just stagnant. And then you start creating other programs, which is the volunteer program, and then say, we'll match your time and we'll encourage you to do that. Then you look at it and say, hey, we can actually do micro volunteering and get people to actually volunteer in 10 minutes or 15-minute segments and, make that to happen. Or there is a way in which we can actually get people to hack for good. And let's create hackathons. It's the largest private sector hackathon in the world over a week, where thousands of employees come together. And Roberto used the hackathon to develop an app for kids, for parents with kids in similar situations, because kids who are paralyzed on one side get epileptic fits. And it's hard to recognize that. So the app actually recognizes the onset of epilepsy. This came about with 20 employees sitting around the world working on an app. So these are just real impactful work that happens. So you can create all of these things. Every company has talent. Utilize it in a ways that which is true to that company, not just because you have to do it.
I agree. I think every company has its own journey. For us at Guardian Life, before a formal corporate social responsibility function had been created, there was a limited matching gifts program. It only matched, for example, higher education institutions. It had varying levels of benefits depending on your seniority in the organization. And it's a whole other conversation in terms of the democratization of philanthropy and wanting to make it equal for all. But I'll say over the years, we've progressed to having a much more open program that is open to all of our employees, even at our subsidiaries, in an equal manner. So it supports their personal passions and organizations that they've been involved with over the years. But then in addition to that, it's that balance of what's the programming and offerings that align with the business. So for us at Guardian, we have our focus areas on economic opportunity, on financial empowerment, and then health and wellness. And so as we build out our employee engagement programs that align with the business and people are engaged in the work, they bring their own creative ideas to the table. So as you talk about hackathons, our tech colleagues are very much engaged in our CSR work in terms of not just our large national partnerships. So we work with organizations such as NPower, we work with Black Girls Code,
Yeah.
But there are smaller, more local things that are happening more organically because they know that these larger opportunities are available. It's like unlocking the creativity. When we think about CSR programs, it's not just the volunteerism, it's not just the giving, but it's the employee education and outreach. So with the killing of George Floyd this past summer, one of the things that we realized at Guardian was that so much of our work in corporate social responsibility was absolutely aligned with inclusion and diversity. We just never talked about it in that way because it is what was natural to us. It was where our focus was from the very start. So to educate our employees on the work that community partners have been doing over the years to dismantle, address the systemic barriers that exist in our society, that was really important. So it's not volunteerism, but the education piece of it is really key to be able to get the engagement piece of it. I see a question around boards, nonprofit board service. For us, nonprofit board service is important. So we support it through our volunteer grants program. As Scott mentioned, I sit on the board of Global Impact. We have employees across the US who are sitting on various nonprofit boards. We have an executive nonprofit board placement program for select executives. And again, it's a balance between organizations that are either locally, regionally, or nationally aligned with what we do as a business, but then also those organizations that tap into the personal passions and the skills of our executives who we're placing on nonprofits. So I think any robust CSR program, philanthropy program, will have that nuance of having to balance both. It's not one and it's not the other. But that is the way I think that you tap into like the business value of what we do. But then more importantly, I think really go deep in terms of being able to bring engagement across the employee base.
No, I completely agree. I mean, you know, board service is another way of getting people out there. I mean, IBM has this whole secondment program, right? That they get employees out into the community for 3-4 months at a time. You know, IBM also has a very robust alumni program where alumni are able to come in and volunteer. Microsoft has the Microsoft Alumni Network, which Microsoft is also building up on doing that. So yeah, I mean, I think there are multiple flavors in which you can get effectiveness of harnessing the power of your employees and bringing them out into the community. As many, you know, educating them is important, providing training programs, giving them, you know, Microsoft does not give time off for board service or volunteering. You do it on your own time, but it pays $25 to the nonprofit. That's the way Microsoft wants to do it. Other companies, you know, say, here, there's a week that we give for you to go volunteer. So every company will have its own nuances as to how effectively they can do. But I think it is important that each company go back and look at what is their DNA and their culture. And I think Guardian, you know, Veena, you've done that by discovering your strengths and saying, this is where we can actually focus on. I mean, you know, there were a lot of times press would call me up and say, why are you not doing anything around AIDS? I don't know anything about AIDS. My employees don't know anything about AIDS. We don't have any technical knowledge. I mean, healthcare industries do. Coca-Cola and Pepsi should do things around water, not Microsoft. And we can talk about things that we know best, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't be supporting, you know, we shouldn't be conserving water, but that's not the core competency of the company to invest its resources, because then it's just writing a check. It is not bringing these 4 things together that I previously talked about. And I think that's where we really need to focus on. So this question about effective ways to educate employees to drive stronger engagement. I think, you know, one of the ways that Microsoft is we got the nonprofit community to come on into Microsoft and share. It is one thing for us to talk about what all they have to do, and we can go blue in our face and people are not going to listen to us. But once you get the nonprofit community, once you get, you know, some of these kids that need service into the community and get them to sit down and talk. And, you know, so many of our different groups created their own little programs. Each VP would do their own little thing and, invite somebody into their group and chat and talk. The way it's structured now is that every VP, there is a VP appointed lead. And that's, 3,500 people that actually spend time doing this education work in their all hands, in meetings, which then primes the pump. When it comes time for people to actually become generous, they can do it. And people can give all throughout the year. But it's really letting people, the employees, drive it versus the company. And we set it up in a way that employees would drive it and not us.
Well, with that, we're going to have to stop only because we've run out of time. But I just want to thank both of you. It is so clear that you have brought your own purpose as a source of light and energy to all of us, to the work that you do, to your corporations, and also to the change in the world. And what a powerful, powerful example that you both set in your everyday lives. And so we thank you for that. And I want to encourage everyone to get a copy of The Purpose Mindset, because I really think it not only represents tremendous examples of Microsoft employees, but really about how all of us can kind of show up and bring purpose. So encourage everyone to get The Purpose Mindset. Just to close out, what we find is that in this whole really continuum of bringing purpose to the workplace and then to the world, that there's often a roadmap of what CSR, corporate philanthropy, can look like. And it starts by really aligning individual and corporate purpose to community. Then it's all about kind of learning from your employees and looking at the data, and then bringing your program to life and continuing to look at how you're making impact. And so we encourage you all to think about where you're at in this roadmap, and if there's anything that Global Impact can do or our speakers can do to help support your efforts. We look forward to being able to stay in contact. Brittany, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Great. So again, we just want to thank you so much for joining. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us with some of the resources shared today. There'll be a link on there to purchase Akhtar's book, some information on Guardian for Good. Again, that roadmap to impactful corporate philanthropy. And I'll also call out a question that you'll see on the email that will help gauge some interest and participation in small peer-to-peer conversations on this topic. It was clear today that this is something that there's more conversation to be had around, and potentially other topics as well. So we look forward to your response. Again, thank you. And after the call, a survey will pop up. We greatly appreciate your feedback. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Akhtar and Veena, for bringing us all light and purpose today.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciated the opportunity. Thank you all.